came out in 1971 through Gay Liberation Front and attended the first UK Gay Pride March in 1972. This was a life-changing experience and fired a lifetime of activism, mainly, but not exclusively, around LGBTQ+ issues. So I'm going to hand it over to Geoff, who is our first speaker for this evening. Geoff, I think you're on mute.
You muted me, right, I'll come back. Did you want to ask me questions, or do you want me to just roll on?
You can roll on for about 8 minutes and then we'll move on to the next speaker and then we'll have questions at the end. Okay, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I feel very old. I've been watching all the faces coming up. I came out through Gay Liberation Front, and Gay Liberation Front, let's just have a quick shufti what Gay Liberation Front was and is. The Stonewall Inn raided, there was an uprising led by a black trans woman, leading person, Marsha P. Johnson. Then later on, the Black Panthers had a big conference, and they actually invited Gay Liberation Front as to express solidarity in the struggle for liberation. Now, liberation in Gay Liberation Front says it all. Liberation means freedom for everyone, everywhere. Although we are talking about Gay Liberation Front, we are talking about liberation for everyone, everywhere. So our struggle is inextricably linked to the struggles of all oppressed people everywhere. And if we don't work with that in mind, we will get nowhere, because single issue politics gets you nowhere. You win rights, but they can be taken away. Now, one of the first things in the Gay Liberation Front manifesto, here we have one, and here's a badge, was that we should free our minds. Because if you simply fight what's wrong out there, and you don't work out that you grow up in this culture, then you will not realize how your mind has been structured in so many ways. So you will have unknown prejudices, unknown structures of ways in which your mind works, and you will also have pictures of who you are. Now, I grew up in the 1950s and 60s. I quickly, once I did realize who I was, I spent a lot of time knowing who I wasn't. I got nothing whatsoever from my education system, hence I became a school teacher. And by the way, I came out in the classroom in 1975 in London in Charlton Boys School. So we were taught to be ashamed of who we were. And this is what I picked up when I went to secondary school. Very quickly I picked up, although I was beginning to be aware that there was something different about me. It didn't occur to me in primary school that other boys didn't find other boys attractive or under girls attractive. So coming across Gay Liberation Front was the first time in my life when I walked into a room and I relaxed inside, totally relaxed. I can remember that feeling of just like, this is my family, this is my tribe. This is what I've been missing. I now know who I am. And the main thing that Gay Liberation Front said to me was, the prejudices around you are their problem, not yours. And what we need to do is come out and be visible. So we had things like gay days in parks, various street theatre things. And in 1972, the youth group within GLF, and I honestly can't remember whether at 21 I was a youth group member or not, decided what we needed to do was actually have a carnival to celebrate who we were, but a political carnival that linked in to the whole idea of oppression. What is oppression? So we had no idea how many people would turn up. I'm taking you back to a time when people could be sacked from their jobs. I was a teacher training college. I ran the risk of being thrown out. So people had a lot to lose by coming out. And we had no idea how many would turn up. We thought maybe 30, 50 if we were lucky. And the numbers change according to who you speak to, but I would say around 500-600 people turned up gradually. It was an enormously wonderful occasion. It was joyous. For me, it was phenomenal. I went out there for the first time in my life, really out in the open, not knowing who was photographing me, not knowing who was filming me. There were probably as many police as marchers. Now, last Saturday, the veterans from GLF, we're now veterans, God, that's weird. We decided we needed to do a march because in our view, Pride has lost its way. It has become a vehicle for big corporations, many of whom, like Barclays, but also BAE Systems, airlines that fly back people seeking asylum when they are failed asylum seekers or they just got out quickly. Not good enough, but also that the Pride has gone from being a march with politics and something to say to being what I would consider to be corporate pinkwashing. It wants us to be assimilated into the consumer capitalist culture and not ask questions about, so what is that culture doing to other people? What is it doing in the world? So we carried banners like, we are the roots of Pride, and we are here to reclaim Pride. And the ages were between about 67 and about 85. And we did the Pride March with some younger people who joined us. So in 2004, Pride actually formed Pride in London, which became a community interest company, which then turned the Pride March into a Pride Parade. That meant that people wishing to join the march, who were not part of organisations, they had to apply and actually obtain a wristband, which later on became something they had to pay for. I think it's outrageous. And then the last time I went last year with my old college, Goldsmiths College. But back in 2012, it was the 40th anniversary when we rang them up, or I rang them up and said, got some GLF people here. It's the 40th anniversary. We'd like to lead the march. And the guy didn't know what GLF was. He had no idea of his history. I was really shocked. And he said, oh, you're wanting a float? I said, no, we don't want a float in very no uncertain terms. We want to lead the parade. As it happens, the whole insurance thing went, so we did lead the parade. But last year, well, the year before last, there was a flyover by the Red Arrows, so an advertisement for BAE Systems and war. So people got together and they formed No Pride in War. And there have been various demonstrations at Pride by people saying this is not good enough. This has to change. This is not liberation. So as I see it, we do not want, if we're talking about Pride, if we're talking about real equality, and I have to say, I am pleased that a lot of these firms, even the ones I have a lot of, and we all have a lot of issues with, have better working conditions for LGBTQ plus people. That is brilliant. I'm all in favor, but don't use it as an excuse to come on and tell us that you are so wonderful and we need to buy your products, back you up, vote for people who like you. No, that is not equality and liberation. That is rights. And if I win my rights, and then I don't link into those other people's rights, then my rights can be taken away at any point if I'm not careful. Yeah. But also, I'm not getting it. Pride is something that we started to turn the shame into pride. I am proud of myself as a gay man. I've lived my life openly as a gay man, as a teacher, as a therapist, even as a political candidate for the Green Party twice in Shrewsbury. I've done it, everything as me. I will not hide. So I think I'm probably running out of time. So I'm just going to say a couple of things, which is, first of all, for the people watching Pride, it is still very important. And I will not in any way say that it does not still do a job of work that is worth having, but it needs to return to its roots. So rights versus liberation, legal equality is not enough. If you want a really good example of that, let's look at Black Lives Matter. Pretty well legal equality, but not real equality, not a real place in society. And an invisible history, just like us, an invisible history. And when you start to say, no, I want to talk about history, I want to tear down those statues. Oh my God, no. No, that's taking the law into your own hands. Well, it's about bloody time we did. It's about time we realize the power we have. So I would like to end. I have no idea how much time I've taken. Sorry if I've overdone it. But there's a wonderful new book by Dan Glass. If you don't know it, you should go and get it, called United Queerdom. It's just come out. And I have been reading it. And there's a wonderful quote in it that he writes, "Powerful systems everywhere maintain the status quo of environmental, racial, and economic oppression by wielding their age-old weapon that makes us believe there is nothing we can do, that we are too little, insignificant, and daft to challenge them. Once we begin to realize this, the mist begins to clear, and the apparatus of the elite is laid bare for all of us to dissect, challenge, and transform." Well, I would add something to that. I would say if you take all of the marginalized groups in this world, together we are the majority, and together we're undefeatable.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you so much for sharing your personal experiences with coming out, Pride, and educating us all about GLF. And also, you so eloquently articulated why Pride needs to be a protest or a march rather than fueled by capitalism. And we need to continue fighting for liberation from oppression on all fronts. That is so true. Now, we do need to move on to the next speaker. We have Harry Gay, who is a campaigner, activist, and a DJ from London. He is currently working with the Outside Projects as their campaigns manager and outreach worker, alongside managing and DJing at Queer House Party. Now, before I hand over, I just want to remind everyone that if you have any questions, please do put them in the chat, because we have 20 minutes for questions at the end of this panel. But apart from that, over to Harry.
Hello, thank you so much for having me at this event. It's a real honour, and it's a real honour to follow on from such an absolute legend. So I will do my best not to mess this up. My name's Harry Gay. It's my actual name. My parents changed it when I was 5 because they didn't want me to get bullied in school. When I turned 21, I was like, it's quite a good name, so I've kept it now, and I'm rolling with it. So yeah, I work at the Outside Project, and I'm currently running Queer House Party as well. I'm going to talk about creating alternative spaces that are anti-capitalist and don't rely on big sponsors a little bit later, but I wanted to start by just talking about some experiences of trying to reclaim Pride and make Pride political over the past couple of years. In 2018 was the first time that the Outside Project, as a group, we decided we wanted to be on Pride. Everything that we do is led by the guests that we have in our shelter. And they wanted a space on Pride. So we contacted, and we had to jump through so many hoops to try and get on the parade. As a grassroots organisation, we didn't really know how to work with such a sort of corporate machine. We ran the shelter originally from an old tour bus back in 2017-18, and we said we wanted to take the bus onto the parade, and that would be our float. Just to show people what our service does was number one, but number two, we have a lot of guests that are fleeing violence, fleeing homophobic, transphobic families. There's a lot of reasons that people end up staying with us. So the idea of having the actual shelter mobile on the parade was to keep them safe as well, so they could look out and see what was going on. Pride got back to us and they told us to paint it in rainbow colours. Pride came back to us and said if we couldn't do that, our guests should wear matching t-shirts and masks. And thus begins my really difficult relationship with Pride, and they really hate me now. This is Pride in London, sorry, I should have said that. Everything doesn't happen here, I'm very aware of that. So that was 2018. We ended up just marching as a group. 2019, Outside Project teamed up with Lesbians and Gays Support the Migrants, Voices 4, which is a youth campaigning group, African Rainbow Family, which is a group of amazing activists that are seeking asylum in this country or have refugee status, and they support people from all around the globe that come here for safety. I can't remember who else. There were more. We decided to march at the back of the parade, and the idea behind that was we don't want to be part of what you're doing here. We don't want to have a wristband. If we want to march, we're going to march. And we did. We had a really powerful event before where we had speakers from all these different groups coming together. And when we went to actually march at the back, we were met by a line of police and a line of volunteers. And when we take into consideration the sort of people that we had with us, people seeking asylum in this country, people who have experienced police violence back home and also in the UK, people that shouldn't be faced with a line of police. Pride in London did that, and they will never be forgiven for that as well. So other things that have happened, I think what's interesting about the campaign that you're currently running is like using Pride as a political mechanism. I know Lesbian and Gay Support the Migrants used Pride as a campaigning tool in 2017. They basically said to Virgin Atlantic, who were at the time taking out deportation contracts with the Home Office, they said to Virgin, if you want to march in our parade and want to march alongside us, you can't be actively harming our community and committing human rights abuses, which is what deportation flights are and do. And they changed their policy on deportations. So it's this weird thing where for 1 month a year, we have social capital to be able to say, do what we say. But the thing is, what we're talking about here is real structural change, and we can't actually get that through corporations. So as much as we say to these corporations, right, stop, like, change your policies, what we need to do is so much bigger than that. And that takes a radical overhaul of the whole of Pride. It was interesting what Geoff was saying earlier as well about these different corporations that are allowed to march on the parade that actively harm our community, like BAE Weapon Systems, and they're all marked very, very highly in Stonewall's Workplace Equality Index. And people don't take into consideration what they're actually doing, not only in this country, but abroad. So yeah, Pride, corporate Pride has become a horrible self-sustaining entity. They tell us that they need all of that money to put it on, but if we stripped it back, like we saw this year, we wouldn't need half of the things that are there. It's just there to prop itself up through those corporations. They need the money because they need the big floats, and then they need security. If it was just us on the streets, we wouldn't need any of that. I'm just going to quickly talk about 2 projects that I'm working on at the moment. So the Outside Project we've been running since 2017. we're a grassroots homelessness organisation. We currently have a shelter, we have a refuge, and a community centre, all in central London. I'm their outreach worker, so I'm at the moment in charge of getting people off the streets and into COVID emergency accommodation. This is an example of like a group of queer people coming together and seeing that there's something missing. There's a service missing from the mainstream that we need for our community, and it took a lot of community fundraising and coming together, but we managed to prove to the government that it was a service that needed to be provided. So we haven't had to rely on corporate sponsorships ever, and we've made it work. And at the beginning of lockdown, me and a group of friends came together and started Queer House Party. And it's sort of another example of doing a community project, something for the community, by the community, that's supported by the community as well, that doesn't have to rely on brands. We haven't had to rely on big names. We've basically put on a party every single week. We did it for 15 weeks. It was exhausting for all of the organisers, but we saw it as a way of bringing people together during COVID over the internet to watch queer performers and have a good time. Basically, the biggest thing that we learned from that as well is the fact that we made it fully accessible. So we have every single party that Queer House Party puts on. We have a BSL interpreter, we have an audio describer, we have someone on captions, and we have been able to do this without big funders. We've been able to pull money together from the community to make this event accessible. And I think my point here is we're constantly lied to by people that say things are too expensive, like we can do it as a community, we can put on events that are radical, that are political, that have meaning and are for everyone in our community. I think that's all I've got to say at the moment, but thank you for having me. I hope I didn't rush through it too quickly, and if you have any questions, please ask them.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was just having some issues with my mic. Yeah, the Outside Project is an absolutely phenomenal organisation who've been doing so much amazing work, and you're absolutely correct in that structural change really does need to happen. I just wanted to say that I love the decision you made to march at the back of the parade. Shows your solidarity. And you're so correct in that we don't need dirty money to fund Pride. We don't need corporate votes. We need people. We need a community. And you setting up the Queer House Party has shown just that, really. So thank you. Now we have got Catrina, our final speaker. Catrina coordinates Young Friends of the Earth Scotland, which is a network of climate and social justice activists aged 16 to 30 from across Scotland. She's been involved in divestment and sponsorship campaigns, grassroots community organisation, and queer and feminist direct action groups. She's also written about the need to frame climate change as a queer issue. So over to Catrina.
Hi everyone. I'm Catrina. I'm from Young Friends of the Earth Scotland. Like I said, we're a network of young activists from across Scotland. We do kind of like skill sharing, training, general support to young activists across Scotland who are working on issues of climate justice and social justice. And I'm going to be chatting a bit about why climate change is a queer issue and about kicking fossil fuel companies and financiers out of Pride. I've got a wee slideshow, mostly because I didn't want to look at my face for 10 minutes, but also because I wanted to share some photographs. So I'll just get that up and hopefully you can all see that. Cool. So queerness and the climate. So I could talk forever on this, so I'm going to be zipping through quite fast, hopefully not too fast. Let me know in the chat if I do. And also just like I am going to be talking about kind of queer oppression and discrimination throughout this, just as a bit of a content warning. But yeah, so we're here because of Divest Pride, this campaign that has been started, whose focus is Barclays, who sponsor lots of Pride events across the UK. are also the biggest fossil fuel financiers in Europe. And it's not just Barclays that sponsor Pride. There are so many companies, fossil fuel companies like Exxon and Shell, or financiers like RBS, dozens of them across the UK sponsoring Prides. And these are companies that are directly fueling the climate crisis. We know why they do it. They do it to make themselves look better, for social license, and it's pinkwashing, like Geoff said. And obviously these divestment campaigns, we're talking about Divest Pride, and kind of refusing sponsorship. Through doing this, we are kind of chipping away at the social license of these companies and saying what you're doing is not okay. And this is kind of a huge campaign across the globe. Divestment is happening in like universities, throughout the arts, sciences, loads of places. But now we're just kind of beginning to look at Pride as one of those places. And yeah, this is particularly important because, as I said, climate change is a queer issue. And I've got a little picture here. So this is from Grampian Pride, which is up in Aberdeen in Scotland. And Aberdeen is the oil capital of Europe. Loads of North Sea oil stuff happens from there. And as you can see, their Pride is obviously completely coated in fossil fuel company logos. And I kind of brought this up because this little bit that they had at the top, thanks sponsors, your support keeps Grampian Pride free for everyone, and basically wanted to make the point that Harry made so beautifully about, like, yeah, kind of at what cost is this Pride free for everyone, and what kind of Pride is it? So yeah, talking about climate change as a queer issue. Climate change harms our communities. Queer people are disproportionately affected by climate change. The impacts of climate change are always felt hardest by those who are already marginalised. And yeah, queer people are more likely to live in areas at higher risk of climate change, of environmental degradation, higher pollution. And this is particularly true of queer people who live in poverty and queer people of colour. They're less likely to have access to resources or ability to relocate when things happen due to climate change. So we're obviously seeing an increase in extreme weather events, more natural disasters. There's also likely to be more conflicts, lack of resources, conflicts over resources coming as a result of climate change. So yeah, we're less likely to be able to kind of relocate away from these kind of issues. Queer people are more likely to be homeless. 24% of homeless youth are LGBT in the UK, already suffering from kind of erratic weather that we're having as a result of climate change. We are more likely to face persecution in times of crisis, such as natural disasters. As trans people, especially trans people of colour, face heightened suffering at all stages of natural disasters. During Hurricane Katrina, for example, trans people faced discrimination in emergency shelters. In some cases, they were turned away from emergency shelters, and the gay quarter of New Orleans is actually yet to recover over a decade later. I definitely encourage you to kind of look into the kind of effects of Hurricane Katrina on the gay community in New Orleans. And I have an image there, which is from Hurricane Michael in Florida, and kind of, yeah, what happened to sort of LGBT centre there. And yeah, the final one, queer people are more likely to have trouble crossing borders, seeking asylum. And again, this is as climate change increases, this is more likely to be an issue. I mean, it's already an issue, but increasing issue. But yeah, through climate justice, we kind of recognise that the roots of climate change are tied up in the roots of so many forms of oppression. And this is really linked into the stuff Geoff was saying about, like, yeah, collective liberation for everybody. So like capitalism and colonialism fuel climate change, but they're also part of LGBT oppression. So I have the example here of Indigenous communities around the world had, and in a lot of cases still have, diversity of gender and sexuality and before European colonizing forces kind of violently, brutally pushed this rigid gender binary on them and tried to wipe out what we now would see as gender nonconformity and queerness. And the effects of that are still seen across the world. We often, yeah, look at formerly colonized countries and in the West kind of like be like, oh, it's so terrible and we're so much better over here. And actually, you know, that was us. The reason that that happens is because of European colonization. But this kind of the colonizing forces that brought all of this are the same forces which brought environmental exploitation, degradation, extractivism that's at the root of climate change. Geoff talked, and Harry talked as well, about kind of anti-capitalism and its importance to queer liberation. It's also such a key part of fighting climate change. So kind of, yeah, fighting capitalism and colonialism, both present day and the legacy, is so key to both fighting climate change, but also to queer liberation. It's the same fight. And yeah, kind of collective liberation is such a key concept to this. I wanted to talk about, yeah, the skills for the fight against climate change. The queer community has so much to offer in this struggle. We've got a really rich history to draw on. Our community knows how to struggle and how to win, how to build resilient communities. We know what solidarity looks like. Kind of the queer community has long recognised that struggles are connected, like Geoff said. And I think a lot of people will have heard of, for example, like lesbians and gays support the miners, and the modern iteration, lesbians and gays support the migrants, got a wee photo there. And also, queer people are already mobilising around climate change. We're already here. I guess most people here today are probably involved in like kind of climate struggles. And I've got a little photo there of DC Pride in 2017, where No Justice, No Pride staged a demo against Wells Fargo, who are financiers of the Dakota Access Pipeline. The photo under this, which I loved, and it's the main reason I have a presentation. This is from 2014, and that's Queers for Climate at New York Pride. So yeah, already happening. So yeah, queer liberation, it's part of climate justice. Climate justice is a queer issue. The more we recognise how our issues are kind of interlinked, the more that the kind of movements come together and work together, the stronger our movements become. And this is definitely something Geoff talked about, and this idea of like patchwork majority coming together. And I guess I just wanted to kind of finish on, yeah, reflecting on this issue of fossil fuel companies and Pride sponsorship. We have such like a rich history of Pride. It's not just an event, it's a protest, it's a site of power, and we can use it. So yes, let's kick fossil fuel companies out, but also these conversations that we're having need to be couched in this like wider discussion like we've had today about corporate pride, about the roots of pride, about what pride really means to us, and about what climate justice means to us as queer people. So these are just some photos from the Radical Bloc at Edinburgh Pride last year, just a wee sign, queer liberation, not rainbow capitalism, which, yeah, I thought you'd enjoy. So yeah, that's me. I'm sorry if I sped through that, but let me know if you have any questions. Also, sorry if I took too long.
Sorry, I was having mic issues again. Yeah, definitely agree with the queer liberation and not rainbow capitalism. And thank you for explaining so well how queer people are disproportionately affected by climate change, and how we're more likely to face homelessness, persecution and trouble crossing borders, and so many more issues. And in particular, thank you for speaking about the colonial history, and it's so important and it's so necessary to recognise how European colonisers forced the gender binary upon so many countries they colonised, and so many people are not aware of this, and they think that the countries that were colonised are so far behind, when in reality they just aren't. So thank you. We're going to move on to some questions now. So if anyone does have any questions, keep them coming in. You can also message one of the hosts if you did want to send it anonymously, but we have got a few to start off with. So firstly, we have an open question for all three speakers. Do you think the issues of companies trying to appropriate pride are solvable within capitalism, or is mass societal reform the best route?
you need to unmute us.
We can hear you there.
Yay, yep. Harry, you need to unmute.
Yeah, does anyone want to answer that question first?
If you could ask the question again, it would help. Nice and slow.
Do you think the issues of companies trying to appropriate pride are solvable within capitalism, or is mass societal reform the best route?
I mean, I can go first if no one else has any immediate thoughts.
Please go first.
You go first, yeah.
Would you like me to go first? Sorry. We're having like a what? Yeah, I mean, my answer when you're asking are social justice questions going to be solved within capitalism, my answer is no, they're just absolutely not. I could give a more nuanced answer, but I mean, no, basically. I think that anti-capitalism needs to be like at the heart of all of our struggles, always. And I think, yeah, obviously it's a very big question, it's a very big fight, whether that's reform or revolution, however you think is going to happen. Capitalism needs to go down. That's my answer.
I just think that they wouldn't be able to appropriate us if they didn't exist. So very on the same page. It's a big question, and I don't know all the answers of how we get there, but I know that all of the things we're fighting against, there is similar reasons, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's obvious to me, it's plainly obvious that capitalism is economic imperialism. And as such, it is impossible for big corporations to deliver any real change. It just isn't going to happen. As for what you said, Harry, in the end, I am for absolutely believe. I'm a crazy optimist. I have seen such huge changes in my life around, yet not answers totally, but racism, queer equality, a march forward in so many attitudes. Having been born in 1950 and seen it all the way through, I know change is possible. What we mustn't do is give up hope. We are alive, and while we're alive, be optimistic, give it all you've got, group together. We will not do it as individuals, and don't do single issue.
Thank you for that. I didn't hear that.
That was amazing, Geoff.
Just don't stop.
The next question for Geoff specifically, what would be the top advice you would give today's young queer activists?
The top advice to give young queer activists: read Dan Glass's book. Because Dan, I mean, he mentioned your project, Harry, in it. It's about he gives examples of activism that works. And then he says, and this is how we did it. And these are the guidelines as to how we did it. And what I would say to young activists is, when you get, first of all, one of the things I would definitely say, because I was asked to give a talk at Goldsmiths College, or Goldsmiths University now, about my life, and I went, fuck, I didn't actually write it down at the time, and I'm trying to remember it. Take copious notes of everything you do, however small it is, because one day, when you are coming up 70, you will be asked to talk about what you have done, and you'll be running around trying to get memories together. So I would say do not, whatever happens, however awful awful things get. Because if we really take on board the whole caboodle that's going down, if you really take all that on and you go, oh my God, it's so big, I can't do anything. So choose one or two things to prioritize and work on those. And when you see the changes that they can create, like Harry's done with the shelter, absolutely stunning work. Or, as I know, working with some LGBT people seeking asylum. I have been a witness in court. I've written witness statements. I have seen the changes that that brings to a person's life. So the last thing I would say on this is, there was a lovely story about two guys, they're walking along a beach, there's been a huge tidal wave and there are dead and dying fish all over the beach. And every now and again, one of them, in the middle of conversation, picks one up and throws it back into the sea. And after about half a mile, the other guy says, why? Why are you bothering? Look at them all. You don't make any difference. It makes a hell of a lot of difference to the ones I throw back.
Thank you, Geoff. The analogy was great. That was a great analogy. It's really like, I don't know why I'm talking so much about the analogy, but I think that resonates with me. And the next question is for Harry. It's from Steph, who says, I liked how you mentioned so much of the stuff we actually want at Pride events. Doesn't cost a lot of money. How much do you think that extends further than just Pride? Are there other institutions that should be representing us, but just throw money at fun eye-catching stuff?
Yeah, 100%. I think in terms of what we actually need at Pride is you just need some cardboard and you need some messaging and you need a sound system and you need some speakers. You just need people. It doesn't cost a lot of money. Extending into the rest of the world, for example, the projects, we had to really fight to show the Great London Authority that it was worthwhile and it was a service that was needed. And it's so ridiculous that we have to kick off and scream about the fact that we do need LGBT specific services. We need funding for services like ours, and institutions aren't going to pay for it. It doesn't benefit them, and they are expensive, and we shouldn't feel guilty about taking money that we've all paid in tax, because it is a service for us, it's for our community, and for our young people as well. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yes, there are a lot of things that we do need money for that aren't eye-catching.
Completely agree. Thank you, Harry.
Could I add something there? One thing I deleted saying was, when Pride became a parade, they had to find an extra £100,000 to turn it into a parade because of everything they were going to add. You take away that parade, you have already got £100,000.
Exactly, completely agree there. And it's quite shocking to think that's how much money is being spent when it could be being spent on so many more things that's so much more important than corporate floats. So the next question is from Georgia, and it's for Geoff. She says she is from Shrewsbury and is an active member of the Green Party in Bristol. My question is how best to tackle trans exclusionary views that hide behind the guise of feminism within so many so-called progressive parties and political groups.
So can you run that by me again?
How do we best tackle trans exclusionary views that hide behind the guise of feminism within so many so-called progressive parties and political groups?
I think this comes down to rights and liberation again. I'm not trans myself, but I think the first thing is to remember that the uprising at Stonewall happened with two black trans women. We must not allow ourselves to be divided, but there is a conversation to be had. And what we must not do is allow ourselves to go into the more you polarize, the more the battle gets so nasty and unpleasant. what we need to do, I think, is to accept, first of all, I mean, the GLF stance is people have a right to define their own gender identity. How you work that in society that will in some way please everyone, that's a hard one. And I don't know the answer, but I do know the answer is to have conversations around it, not fight my right against your right. It's a thorny question, and if I said much more than that, I think we might get into going off on a tangent, and I don't want to do that. This is not about that. I'd happily come in on that debate, but I don't want to go down the road of that. What I would say is, try to get people together to have a conversation and hear each other. We have to hear each other. There is pain on both sides. There are things to be said on, well, both sides, all sides. All sides. And I think one of the mistakes that the trans argument or the anti-trans argument makes is to assume that everybody is trans. We're talking against the gender binary again. We're not. We are talking about the questioning of what gender is. What is the gender binary? And I know from the local youth group in Shrewsbury, I have never been so damned excited in my life than to see people actually questioning, what is this crap? Why do I have to choose to be a man or a woman? I want to be me. And I'm going to say how I define myself. To me, that is revolutionary. And that comes outside, I think, of the remit that is being put forward by people who are being exclusionary around trans. I think their pictures are very dated. And I think there are ways through with all of this. They usually focus on schools. The other thing I would say is, look who's behind the whole thing. It's just like Brexit. Look who's behind it. Christian Institute, Safe Schools Alliance, Citizens Go. We are next. Do not get into bed with people you don't want to fuck with. That's okay. I mean, that's a. Sorry, I just blew it. That's, you know, there are things that need to be talked through.
Mm-hmm. Ria's microphone might have gone again. So, shall I ask one for everyone?
Go for it.
Someone has asked, I'm involved in setting up a new lesbian and gay support the migrants group in Manchester and the north of England. Any ideas for demos or campaign events in the period of COVID?
Do you want to start that one, Harry?
Yeah, I guess I could. I think there's a lot to be said around what is happening in that area. I think when you're working as a solidarity movement, I think it's important to understand the people that are being disproportionately affected by COVID. So highlighting and amplifying voices is the most important thing that you could be doing at this time. So turning up and supporting the ongoing BLM marches that are happening every single weekend. Turning up and showing support for what's already going on. Like, we're in this moment of amazing social change that has come from so much hardship and such a horrible time, but if we can all get out and support the movements that are happening now, and I think that's the best place, that's the way your efforts will be best placed during this time.
Thanks, Harry, for stepping in there. And yeah, just thank you to Geoff as well, speaking about why conversations are so important, and we really do need to be having those conversations, and people should be willing to listen to them. And also advocating for identification, self-labeling is really important. And again, thank you, Harry, for your comments. I think we need to wrap up now. I'm so sorry to everyone who sent in questions and didn't get those answered, but we are moving on to the disco part of the evening. I will be handing over to Steph now.
Thank you, and welcome to the queer disco section of the night. Amazing talks. Thank you to all our fabulous speakers. And I think it showed like how important it is to have these political talks in our events, to get away from this corporate spectacle of pride, and reclaiming pride from this kind of thing where transphobes and even fossil fuel companies are allowed to march, but marginalized queers are excluded. Yes, once again, thanks again to all the amazing speakers. And now, so we know that the politics is important, but also partying is important too. And so we have got some fantastic DJs coming up. So we've got sets from lots and lots of very